It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Yvonne Howard-Bunt, who brings over 30 years of experience in fields associated with race and ethnic relations, mediation, conflict resolution, and intercultural communication. She's worked extensively as a trainer and mentor for multi-agency platforms prior to completing her doctorate. She's currently writing books representing her personal experience of racism from childhood through to the present day, as well as advising on policy and procedure for organisations and underrepresented groups. So Dr. Howard-Bunt, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining today, and I've been looking forward to this event and joining in with everyone. Basically, I want to talk a little bit about the experience of the past in relation to today, and how the ambassadors and influencers of time past actually fit within what is happening right now here today. And I'd like to start off by just mentioning that since the pandemic and lockdown, many people have found themselves isolated and trapped within their own experience, really. And this has been a very emotional state of play for many people, and particularly elders within communities. But one of the things that is important to me within this, and why I wrote the title Ambassadors and Influences, the Digital-Analogue Pendulum of Community Communication in the Age of the COVID-19 Pandemic. Well, ambassadors and influencers have come from a time period, and particularly within the Muslim communities. Pioneers came to the UK and they found that they were rejected on so many levels and experienced discrimination in housing and employment, in access to public services. And with that in mind, infrastructure was set up, infrastructure that enabled people to flourish, to grow, to support one another. And from within that, businesses were set up where people could be employed and engaged within everything that was happening with their own communities. Now, from within that, these neighbourhoods that were created, these cluster neighbourhoods, they were also inside of a space that was occupied by people who perhaps didn't receive the newcomers and didn't want them to be there. And it was difficult to conduct everyday life situations, and prayer meetings were held in homes, in people's homes. And what we found, working within mediation and conflict resolution within the community, was that many people complained about parking, gatherings of people, noise disturbance, sewing machines on the go that were part of building and setting up business. And these complaints were something that I was part of addressing within the organisations that I worked for. I also worked within training teams of lay and professional volunteers to engage within the communities, to try and resolve certain issues and conflict that arose. But what we have today, it's quite interesting for me to revisit the past and to take a look at some of the earlier work and to relate that to the experience of today, and looking at how digital influences are so much a part of absolutely everything that exists today. However, there is another element which is to do with I'll move on to the third slide here, which is to do with the pivoting relationship between digital and analog. And what I'm talking about when I talk about digital and analog relationships and communication is the digital element of communication, we all understand about that. But there is also the offline analog element of communication, and that has occurred within the neighbourhoods and within these early pioneer neighbourhoods where people gathered in homes and in spaces wherever they could meet. There were these gatherings, there were stories told. There were stories told of the past, of history and previous experience. And there were those stories interacted with the newer stories brought in by the experience of younger generations. So these conversations that occur around a kitchen table or over a communal meal, or it could be some shared social space. These conversations, they have a life of their own, and they become a part of something that then is applied to the digital sphere, because a conversation can occur, and then from that, understanding can change, can develop, can be modified. And then it can, this same conversation or a variation of that can end up being discussed in some form on a digital platform. And then the conversations on the platform, digital platforms, again, go back to the table and go back to the home environment. They go back to the playground and the areas that are offline. So these two interact, the online and the offline, and it's a navigation of sorts that swings back and forth like a pendulum, that it doesn't exist outside of itself. And it's this interface really between the two that is key to new developments and new thinking. And many new ambassadors have come out of the communities where they have listened to the stories of elders or of relationships and of other people in their space. And they have a clear understanding of everything that affects the community. They also live in an external space, and they can bring those two elements together and marry both. This issue and storytelling element has been with us through time immemorial, and we've all learned stories about the past and how various elements play a part in life. They contain social, political changes, and they impact in such a way. They're part of everyday experience, and they're part of the diasporic trail of life and the footprint of people that have navigated and dealt with the experience of arriving in the UK and then trying to build a community and a lifestyle. And these things, this information is not lost. It's passed down, it's handed down, and it is mediated again by the new stories and the additions of new information. And what we're seeing is that there's ambassadors and influencers who have that information, and they are now very active in the digital space, but they're also very active in analog space. So they move fluidly in between those two spaces and have so much to create and understand within that. Analog and digital communication, they're not polar opposites, and they interact, as I said, in residential space, and they're not Previously we would have relied much more on slower traditional analog forms of process and communication. But now those pathways, those infrastructural pathways and subcultures, they remain intact, but they encompass the digital element today. And it is both those elements, analog and digital, that are part of the socialization process. We see young babies in pushchairs navigating the digital highway or learning to do it very early on in life. And that is all part of this process. And it goes through from one generation to the next. But the key speakers and the key people who have this knowledge, it's a wealth of knowledge, and it incorporates the old and the new, and it brings us into something new and something different. Yeah. And this is one way that the organizations and the some of the groups that I participate in, they are talking about everything to do with COVID and the pandemic and the issues that people are facing. And in doing that, they bring that knowledge and that expertise with them. And there are elements of trust if someone speaks from within a community. But then there are also enough voices that challenge views, and so that people can actually speak and find out and explore what they feel is right for them. This is quite a short presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. A very kind of useful insight, I think, into an area that, at least for me, is relatively new. So thank you very much.